Hey guys, Cody Beinert here, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the latest record from Imminence entitled The Black. Imminence is a Swedish modern metalcore band that to my knowledge has been gaining quite a lot of hype within the past few years. I came to know them through their previous record, Heaven in Hiding, back in 2021, which was an album that I don't recall hearing in full, but from what I remember from what I have heard from it, I thought some songs were nice and I thought others were just kind of meh. If I were to try to describe their sound, it's sort of like what would happen if a modern metalcore band such as Architects or Bury Tomorrow attempted to utilize string instrumentation into the mix to give things an almost cinematic neoclassical flair, which in of itself I think sort of put them on the map for metalcore bands of their ilk. Now, when it comes to this record in question, I was actually kind of looking forward to it, for I did really enjoy a handful of the singles as they were dropping, even though I didn't hear all of them because it felt like they were on the verge of releasing too many of them prior to the album's release date, which sadly did turn out to be the case. But regardless, I was still fairly intrigued to hear how the album as a whole would be brought together. Now, in terms of the reception I've been seeing towards this record and this band kind of in general, I feel like the responses seem to be either like, holy shit, this is like the second coming of Christ, or this is mid-generic core that tries to not sound like generic core by just attaching violins to the, instrumentation. And I more than understand both sides of this discussion, because on one hand, there are definitely points where I felt as if that they were sort of attempting to lazily make up for somewhat unimaginative songwriting with the usage of strings. On the other hand, there were also plenty of other points across the album that I think used these elements very effectively to give things a kind of lush and cinematic flair and vibe. And as a result, I personally mostly did enjoy this record quite a bit. The record starts with this sort of moody and kind of slow burner of a number titled Come Hell or High Water, which has this sort of slow-paced build-up that kind of makes me think of something like Sleep Token or something, which is also backed by this, decently written, albeit maybe kind of predictable hook, but whatever, it's still a neat way to open things up regardless. The album really starts gaining momentum when we get to the songs Desolation and Heaven Shall Burn, both of which follow pretty typical modern metalcore archetypes. They're these more fast-paced and energetic sort of verses that are broken up by these more big and dramatic choruses, which also feature, the names of the songs being sung to some extent. And both tracks also sort of just transition into these pretty standard metalcore breakdowns with these, harsh vocal callouts. But still, this formula is still executed fairly well in my opinion, and I do really love the usage of violin to kind of elevate the sense of urgency and epicness that the songs tend to have, giving them a vibe that almost feels reminiscent of like some kind of boss battle theme from a video game, which I do find really charming. And that in of itself pretty much summarizes a very large portion of the track list. Now, as I've hinted at a little bit earlier in this review, all the songs that I've talked about up until this point were all singles. And in fact, half this album is comprised of singles, and of the 6 non-singles, 3 of them are interludes. The interludes in of themselves I will get to in a little bit, although I will say up front the song Cul-de-sac is kind of mid in my opinion. But in general, as an album listener, I do find that kind of irritating, even though I didn't hear all of the singles leading up to it. And I can definitely see how this can make someone who was maybe looking forward to this record feel kind of let down by it overall, especially since 2 of the 3 non-interlude non-singles, which are Beyond the Pale and Call of the Void, are fine, but just don't add anything to the track listing, at least not in my opinion, to the point where they just sort of come and go and don't really have much of an impact in the context of the album at all. Call of the Void I especially found to be just way too unimaginative for its own good. However, The remaining non-interlude, non-single that I've yet to talk about, which is Come What May, actually is one of my favorites on the album, with this really neat kind of 6/8 groove, along with a really big and very emotively delivered chorus as well, before it then leads into a very grandiose finale that overall makes it kind of a highlight on the track list. Also, in general, towards the end, things do reach a somewhat higher quality. Continuum is a very neat song in the way that it sort of contrasts some pretty visceral metalcore brutality with this kind of dreamy and almost mournful sounding chorus, which allows it to very effectively evoke feelings of both anger as well as melancholy. L'appel du vide is a pretty neat sort of post-rock-ish, mostly instrumental interlude number that kind of reminds me of something like Black Hill or other like instrumental ambient post-rock of that same ilk, which does a pretty neat job at kind of building tension towards the pretty epic title track. The album then concludes with Le Noir, which is this sort of Max Richter-ish instrumental neoclassical piece that I did find quite pretty. So yeah, overall, I did enjoy The Black quite a bit. I thought it was a solid album. It had a lot of entertaining songs. It may have been bogged down a little bit by some kind of formulaic structures and general songwriting, to the point where if you hate the sound of modern metalcore, especially stuff that is this hyper clean in terms of production, I 100% guarantee this album will not change your mind. But if you love this kind of sound, this is definitely not an album you should miss. And even as someone who used to love this kind of sound with metal music, but maybe doesn't find it quite as interesting anymore, I still got quite a bit out of this record, more so than I honestly expected. And so yeah, those are my thoughts on the latest record from Imminence titled The Black. If you've heard this record, please let me know in the comments down below. What did you think of it? And of course, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment, and I will see you guys next time.